Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of the Women, Career, and Life podcast. This is your host, Dr. Sirisha Kuchimanchi. I'm a former semiconductor tech executive from Texas Instruments, an entrepreneur, of course, a podcast host, and a working mom. I first want to thank every one of you who's been here to support over the last 2.5 to 3 years on this journey of podcasting that I've been on. I can't believe it's coming to an end. It's been a very hard decision to make of letting things you love and letting them go. But I'm at a crossroads, and this seemed like the best decision now. I actually sent out a survey on LinkedIn asking people what they wanted to hear on this final episode, and overwhelmingly, the response was on my own personal transformation. So let's dive in. I thought of the idea of podcasting over 3 years ago, around the holiday time, and actually ended up recording a few seconds on my iPhone on some of the topics I was interested in. And the reason for starting this podcast was on empowering women and enabling them to reach their goals and achieve career and financial success. This came out of my own journey of trying to figure out my own career path as I was growing, especially when I returned to work after being a stay at home mom. I felt like my mindset had shifted and I was looking for pathways to address and take. And having a lot of mentors and the support system really helped. But there were also a lot of questions that was quite hard to figure out the answers. And I often found that having conversations with the women around me, whether they were close friends who lived in the same continent or across the ocean, I think often we face the same struggles. And I thought, why not start a podcast to see how we can embark on this journey together? When the first thought came after recording those episodes, I actually sent it off to my sister to have a listen and ask her what she thought of it. So, based on that brief conversation with her, I connected with an old friend of mine who helped me brainstorm all of this as I was getting ready to launch the podcast. I want to say a huge shout out to Usha for spending a lot of time helping me figure out what to do in the podcast, how to figure out a niche, like what would be the difference, and looking at this completely differently. When you are often sitting in a corporate career, probably like myself, my exposure to public speaking and anything that looked like media outside was very limited. Yes, I had done a couple of talks, a couple of panels at work and outside briefly, but that did not give me the wherewithal to sit in front of a microphone. When deciding what to focus on, the focus, obviously, from my own interest in a lot of conversations, was on this journey with women and figuring out what would be different based on our own unique perspectives. The first time we recorded ourselves, I remember we were trying a different things. And the first time I essentially recorded myself, when you hear your voice on the microphone, oh my gosh, it sounds so weird, so awkward. And then you realize how many pauses are there, how many ums, how many ahs, how many times you repeat the same words. And making a transition in a conversation is very hard because you're incredibly conscious of how this goes on. It took many iterations of recording and listening and editing and trying to figure out how to smooth this conversation and get used to your own voice in your ears. Everything about this whole podcasting journey was new, except some of the content ideas based on my own experiences and reading a lot of books. But even that was a lot of learning. So the idea of figuring out how to record, what software to use, how to edit, oh my gosh, that was the hardest. I remember one of the first episodes, basically, I had about 30 minutes of recording. And because me and the guests were also new to this idea, we basically worked on it to reduce it to 20 minutes. And literally, the 20-minute editing took 8 hours to do. So you can imagine 55 episodes later, 20 hours of content, give or take, took 200 plus hours of editing. That's how much time it takes to edit. Obviously, over time, this got a lot better because I figured out systems, processes on how to do this, and even the interviewing and the kind of questions I asked got better and smoother, so it didn't require as much editing. So, whole editing bundle was a transformational journey itself. Then deciding on the branding, the content, and how a podcast needs to look and the colors to choose. All of these are different aspects you learn on the job. Decided to do a couple of episodes to record. I sent it off to a couple of friends to do beta test launch. I was going to flit from topic to topic, but then based on the feedback I heard from them, they really wanted a deep dive. So if you ever listen to the first episode, it is on going through a layoff that Usha and I discussed. At that point, layoffs were never discussed in public. Now you see them on LinkedIn. There's a way to have a conversation about it. But early on, when we started the podcast, it was a very taboo subject. But we decided to unwrap because we had both taken career breaks, being stay at home moms, going through these career transitions, that we decided to share these ideas. Once we did that, we heard a lot of engagement from our listeners and spent a whole season talking about how to relaunch from a career break, which also was at not yet normalized. But I'm so glad to see that on LinkedIn, you can put a career break now and everybody understands what that means. Not only did the podcast give an avenue for others to learn, but for me also to learn from my guests from all the reading I did. When I first reached out to the first guest, it was so exciting for someone to say yes when you hadn't even launched a podcast. So thank you immensely to the guests who are willing to share their time and experience on something they didn't know was going to even be published or how it was going to show up. We truly appreciate the time they took to do this. Once having done a lot of episodes, I wanted to walk you a little bit through the process of behind the scenes of how this is done. I would always write up a 3 pages, 4 pages PowerPoint deck that I would send every guest on what the theme of the podcast was and what questions in overview that we were going to address. Because this was not about prepping for the interview as much as understanding which area of focus we wanted to. Because though a lot of the guests have immense vast backgrounds, and there was one specific area that we were interested in conversing on. I hope you learned a lot from these discussions that we had ourselves. So, first of all, sitting in front of the mic the first time was very scary. Even I would wake up in the night to edit a lot of this. I would even wake up at 3 a.m. to do Instagram posts. The reason I bring this up is it had been 7 years since I had sat on Facebook before I started my podcast. I had absolutely no social media presence. As someone who is incredibly private, to go in front of a microphone and start posting on social was even more harder than just sitting in front of the mic and learning all the new tools on how to engage on social media. I still find it quite challenging to engage on social media, and I tend to take it in small bites that I can manage because I feel like you can spend enormous amounts of time doing that, but figuring out what works for you is always the hard part. Once I started to post on social, it was great to hear from people who were able to ask questions and engage. I still remember the first time we launched the podcast. It launched in August. So the idea came in December. It took 3 months, January, February, March, to think of the topic, to practice. What is the frequency you want to post? What do you want to talk about? How are you going to decide what to talk about? How long is your episode? Basically, the execution of that, sort of the test pilot program, took about 3 months to do. In March is when we sent it out to all of our trusted friends, and 10 of them took the time to respond, based on which we evaluated the podcast. The podcast finally launched in August of 2021. Since then, it has always dropped an episode every 2 weeks. The only time it took a break was recently this summer, as I was trying to figure out which direction the podcast took. And it's sort of been an evolution in progress. First year, all the episodes were 20 minutes as I talked to guests. And based on the feedback that I was receiving and just the amount and amazing fun I was having, I got a lot more confident talking to guests. And I just wanted to learn more from them. And I figured people would learn from their different experiences and keep the conversation engaged. These turned into 40, 50-minute episodes. I understand that in these times when even all our attention spans are not so long, I hope you're still able to consume as much as you can of the podcast. And the guests were very generous with sharing their time and expertise. As the momentum sort of grew, it also enabled us to reach a wider spectrum of people, as in guests, but also listeners. As this podcast wraps up, we have people listening from over 30 countries from all six continents. I don't count Antarctica. Maybe they do get podcasts, but I'm not sure. But it's amazing. The podcast is called Women, Career, and Life. And I'm so grateful that 70% of the listeners are women, but also that 30% of the men listening to this podcast want to be using it for not only enabling their journey, but supporting the women in their ecosystems. We can all work together and lift each other up, and that's the only way to move forward. I started the podcast for a couple of reasons. I felt like I had access to opportunity in education and sort of a place of privilege. And I wanted to be able to share not only my perspective, but use that platform to share others' perspectives so we can all play on a bigger playing field. I feel that we oftentimes start at the back of the line when there's a race going on. And I wanted us as women to have an opportunities to start at the front of the line so we didn't have to make up the same difference every single time. I still have notes from when I first started the podcast. The one thing that I was hoping it would do was change at least one single person's trajectory or thought process or something that they wanted to pursue and make a difference in one person's life or one action they took. There have been many people who have listened to it and many downloads. The podcast eventually ended up being a top 30% Spotify podcast, which was enormously humbling. It's also given me a lot of opportunities that I didn't foresee when I started this. It's given me the ability to stand in different stages to talk to people, be it at executive in corporate companies like Toyota or AEM, given me opportunities to speak in front of large crowds of university students, either at CMU or Johns Hopkins. One of the things that I really wanted to do was to be on a TEDx platform. And I was able to do that not too long ago, and hopefully you'll get to listen to it soon by talking about the topics I still care about: career advancement and financial well being, no matter what age you are. I even got to stand for my very first election for the board of governors of the Podcasting Academy. And I'm ever so grateful to the podcasting community. For those of us who are content creators or thinking of creating content, one thing we all have to know and we all probably understand is content creation is a very lonely process. You're often sitting in front of your mic and some digital screen recording yourself. Maybe you have a guest on the other side, but that's pretty much the only interaction you'll have. You don't have a community around you. So when I got to go to my first podcasting conference in Dallas, I was able to start to meet people who engaged in the same space. And I cannot tell you how heartening that was to meet other people like that. They've become friends, they've become mentors, and I've also gotten the opportunity to mentor them. And that's what led me to the Podcast Academy. There are a lot of other communities that support content creators and podcasters. So if you're ever in that space, don't forget to hit me up and DM me. You never know when you start a journey, when you know very little and you're petrified of getting on it, where those roads might lead. And that's exactly what happened with my podcasting. And it's with immense sadness, a bit of trepidation, that I let this podcast end today. I hope you have got something that you are able to take away from these episodes. And I wanted to tell you what I took away beyond my personal transformation, what I learned from all the conversations that I had. So let me sum it up the way I hear it. We all have doubts and we make mistakes, but by persevering and learning, we can move forward. Don't forget to lean into your tribe because they are the ones who are going to support you and keep you going. Surround yourself with mentors, sponsors, advocates, and allies because this network of people is going to help us really achieve and surpass our goals. If you're wondering what these terms mean, check out some of the earlier episodes. or even subscribe to my Substack newsletter, because this is where I spike some of this information out. Because in the end, in our own lives, we have to build what we think of as a board of directors. We are the CEO of our lives, be it our career, be it our personal lives, or be it our financial lives. They all thread together to build a tapestry. So be the CEO and decide who you want to appoint to this board. Don't forget to take every opportunity that knocks, unless there's a good reason to reject it. Always be prepared, because you never know when that opportunity will knock at your door. Ask people questions, be curious, be inquisitive, because people are always willing to share and support. Expand your network, either through the organizations that you engage with, through LinkedIn or other forums, and find like-minded people. I today sit at a crossroads, and I do not know quite where the future is going to lead, but I'm really excited about where this journey forward will take me. And I want to thank you again for listening to this podcast, and a big, immense thank you to all the guests again for sharing their time, their expertise, their friendship, their mentorship, and so much more. Some of them have become friends. I expect to stay connected with a lot of people that I've met through this podcasting journey. This is not a door that's closing completely, but a window left slightly open for the breeze to float in and for us to keep cool and stay connected. One way to stay connected with me, for us to continue this conversation, is through my newsletter. If you're interested, you can check out in the show notes and subscribe to the Substack. And we can still have a discussion about things we care about. I just want to wish you goodbye and thank you for listening. These episodes will not fade away. They will continue to stay on all the podcast platforms that you listen to. So if you ever want to check them out again, go find them through your favorite app and listen in. Wishing you all the best in your own journey, for all the risks you're going to take and the opportunities you're going to grab. I wish you every success for the future. Thank you. Goodbye.